Well, hi everyone. Welcome to our first episode or edition of the Natter about the Great British Sewing Bee. So I have, ladies first, I have the wonderful Kim Solomon, and I have my much older sister, John Scot. How are you all?
Well, I'm fine. I was just reveling in how much Botox you'd had.
I've only had a little freshener.
That's what
You
he
look
said,
fabulous.
John.
Both of you look fabulous.
So do you. So I tell you what, it's talk about put the cat among the pigeons. I had loads of people sending me like reviews from newspapers, and it's really sort of like down the middle. Some people who have reviewed it have said it's really had its day. Do we really need to continue with it? And on the other side, they're saying, oh, it's just lovely. But like there's no one that's going like, wow, you know. And it just well, in my own opinion, last night just felt a little bit, it felt a little bit flat. And now we don't have Joe Lycett sort of bring in this slightly fun element to it. I'm not too sure the new host, I didn't get so much from her. I don't know, what did you think?
You go first.
Well, I watched it last year with Sarah Pascoe, and I have to say that I was having a conversation last night whilst watching it. To me, the best presenter was Claudia by a country mile.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's no need to be cracking jokes, and I don't really like the daft gimmicks that are the links, for the hour to go. My biggest issue was as the programme opened, they had a couple of comments from Patrick and from Esme, and Esme's comment was, it's not all about the sewing. And I actually immediately thought, what's the name of this program, the Great British Sewing Bee? So straight away I was on a bit of a, but I understand where you're coming from. John, what do you think about the...
I'm glad you, because I've been worried all day, because obviously I watched it last night when it was on. And I was thinking, oh, how am I going to go and say, because I thought you two would be like, oh, isn't it fabulous, fabulous? And I was like, oh, I think it's had its day. Right, okay. I think it's lovely for the sewing community, because it shows you how, I mean, when they rushed to help that girl that was in tears and everything, I thought that was lovely. And that summed up the sewing community to me. But as a show, I wanted things like, they've forgotten that it's like you say, they've forgotten it's about sewing. We didn't get any sewing tips. We didn't see any proper sewing. And when the boy, what was he called? Tony was working in Jersey. They didn't go, oh, you need a different needle for Jersey. Oh, you're doing a different stitch for Jersey. How do you make Jersey fit? And when they were critiquing the cutouts, they weren't saying why. They kept going, oh, it's too big. Oh, this one's too big. This one's a bit gapey. I want to know, as a sewer, why it's gaping. I want to know how you sew it and how you get over that. And I know they've only got an hour, but to me, it was nothing to do with the sewing. It was more about the speed to make things and, like you say, the funny, quippy things, which I don't need or want.
And I do think the girl that went out at the end, Catherine, I think she's a very good sewer. However, she can't sew under pressure, under that time pressure, because the first mistake she made was on the pattern challenge when she put the sleeve inside the wrong way. You wouldn't do that at home, because you would check it and check again. Yeah. And then, of course,
I also think that on the first one, nobody should go, because I think that gives them added pressure. I don't want to be the first. I don't want to be the first. I don't want to be the first. And that, like you say, things that she wouldn't have done at home, like put a sleeve in the wrong way round and things like that. And the pressure of that room, she wouldn't have burst into tears at home and gone and sat in the corner. And I think there's too much pressure on that rather than on the sewing.
Yeah,
it's too much of sometimes the personalities. I mean, when I spoke to Kim this morning, I'm just glad that there's no one this year who has come on who is announcing that they're this great pattern cutter, and that they've used their own pattern and they've done this and they've done that. But it really does seem to be more what the program was set out to be, which is real sort of like home sewers. I mean, obviously there's people on there that want to start a career after it, but I thought it was a very strange sort of like, it was a very strange sort of mix. And the top that they were creating, my biggest bugbear is they do it on the bake-off where everyone has the same ingredients. You shouldn't allow them to choose their own fabric, because if I was savvy, then I would make it out of something that was woven and didn't have any stretch, because you're setting yourself up for a fall, picking a jersey fabric, thinking, oh, that'll be nice, or it's the only color that you liked in the storeroom. And also, if you'd used the Visaline seam tapes and bias tapes, that would have it would have sped the process up for them, and it would have meant the jersey was easier to handle. And these tapes are there. They've got them in the haberdashery, because we know that we know Visaline is there. It's just, where are the people where they're just sort of like pointing out? I mean, they obviously haven't been told, oh well, here's this and these are used for this, and if you want interlinings, there's that, and stuff like that. And also rotary cutters. Who
was it? It was one girl.
I'm screaming at the TV.
Right at the beginning, I wrote it down. The first thing I wrote down, Lauren, she was cutting towards herself with a rotary cutter.
Oh, it was just, as soon as I saw it, and I just thought, one, there is a huge debate. And for instance, I know that when we did this, when I did this with Sarah Payne a few years ago, because she's a quilter, she also, when she dressmates, she uses a rotary cutter. And I was like, no, you don't use a rotary cutter. And she was like, but, and I was saying, yeah, but the thing is, when you're applying pressure and you're rolling like that, you're actually stretching the fabric. And before you know it, you'll keep on trying to shave little bits off, say, particularly around an armhole or a neckline, and you'll end up making it all ski width.
Yeah, exactly. I always think that this is just following on from your point about them. I hate the transformation challenge. I think it's a waste of time. I think a designer and a sewer are two different skills. Because I know that my sewing used to be like, it's not now, but was the best thing. But if you gave me a design challenge, I was okay. I could understand it, but I didn't class myself as a designer. I think a designer is a different person to a technician. So I think that the transformation challenges, they should all be given the same piece of fabric, the same zip, or whatever it is that week. And they all start and finish at the same. Because they're all doing weird and wacky things, everything, but I want them to put in a concealed zip. I want them to do a turn up on a pair of trousers. And if they're all given the same piece of fabric and the same thing, and given the hour or the 90 minutes or whatever, then you'll see who can actually sew and who can't. It's not, some people can be the best sewers in the world, but when you give them 90 minutes and an old, I don't know, checky bags or something, they're not going to be able to create something. And none of those last night were wearable. Not one of the things. And the winner was a load of old rubbish.
And the biggest thing that,
in my opinion,
what the other thing that I get really grumpy about was they had in the transformation the blouse and the skirt, and they could use the scrap bag, but we had to see the blouse and the skirt. The guy, he was called Tony as well, who did the shorts. He did half of the skirt or the blouse and half out the scrap bag, and they made a comment about that. And yet others had used an equal amount of fabric out the scrap bag. So I know they're trying to say things, but they're not consistent in what they say. And in little things like the French seam, that would have been brilliant had they actually done that as a VT to say, this is how you actually do a French seam, because people do, it's French seam's a hard one for people to get around, particularly patchworkers, because we normally work right sides together, and so therefore obviously you're doing it the other way around. But had they done that as an explanation, then it would have been a big tick in my box last night.
Or that could have been the middle. Instead of doing a transformation, they're all given two pieces of silk, and they don't have to make a garment. They just have to show how to do a French seam and who does it the best.
That's right.
Yeah, because that's what they do on Bake Off.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Like the technical challenge. Yeah, they all get the same thing and they all have to make it. Yeah.
And the other big bugbear that I have is when people are sewing, as well as using the tools, is when they are putting their arm through the machine and stretching the fabric through. So immediately, instead of sitting like this with the machine and allowing the feed dogs to take it through, they're stretching the fabric, and then they wonder why on the twisted top the fronts weren't sitting right. Yes, you could have used the Vliseline seam tape for there, or on the other garments where they had the cutouts. Why was it bagging? Yes, there's the cutting, the pressing, and the sewing, but when they're sewing, you can see them stretching it through. And I just think they need many years ago, the Sewing Bee team came to the shop when I had it, looking back to the home sewers, which was great. But they do need some guidance, and I know there's people in the back who give them the advice. We know there's a team there. They should be given just little hints and tips to help, or
they do a thing going, go and make this top. This might help you, and they're told about the Vliseline or the bias strip or whatever. They're told about it because, like you say, half of them won't even know. If they've not been trained, they won't even know what it's for. They wouldn't know how to apply it. So they should be given a hint saying this might do. And then if people don't use it, they don't use it. If people do use it, then it's going to help them, isn't it?
The other thing that do it as an I Spy. Did anybody? Because mine's here. They'll have spotted. They get provided with all the prim haberdashery. She says. So this was on the tables, which is the ham, and they had this one and then the other shaped ham. At no time did I ever see anybody when they were pressing their sleeves. Did they use? They could, as I say, I Spy. If anyone's looking back again, this is a prim product, and it was sitting there on the table. So yes, they've got the things that have been provided by these big companies, but the information isn't being passed down to the contestants. And to a degree, you're setting them up for failure. Because if I went into a class,
well, it's better telly.
Yeah,
it's better telly if they cry or they make a mistake or the hem doesn't work or they don't press it properly. I don't want to bash the whole show because I know hundreds and hundreds or thousands of people are going to have loved it. But I do think it's a bit formulaic, the casting now. So when they introduce at the beginning, you go, oh, yeah, that's that, one from last. It's kind of, they've all got, I don't want to say characteristics. You can tell the shy one, the one that lives with the mum, the outgoing one, the zany one. They've got all those boxes ticked. You know what I mean?
They need to change the format up, don't they?
I think they need. I think they need to. The biggest thing is the technical challenge that just needs to be simplified, and actually it needs to be a proper critique, because they're not. They don't. When they're judging, they don't seem to have like a tick box sort of thing where they're looking at 5 elements that has to be ticked, and then that's how they judge it. But I can't remember exactly what part of it, but there was an orange or red sleeve on somebody's garment, and there was a shot of it. And one of my biggest bugbears, especially having been on Savile Row, is literally the pitch of the sleeve. The pitch of the sleeve was almost way back there, and I'm thinking, a sleeve shouldn't go straight down. A sleeve should slightly elevate forward, because if you actually look at yourself in the mirror, your elbow is naturally bent, so it actually naturally comes forward. So most sleeves are shaped like a banana, if you like, and the banana sits to come towards the front. But I was just looking at it and I was thinking, why aren't they pulling them up about that? Because that's a useful critique, because they can't tell them, oh, it's amazing, when your sleeves, if you actually put a body in that, it would start all creasing up and crumpling there. So it's not, I just don't think it's not really being informative to people at home. So like you said, John, and like you said, Kim, it's like when they're telling people why things are like, this is wrong, that's wrong, but they're not actually telling you why it's wrong. Like for instance, Paul Hollywood will go, you've overproved that, or you've put too much salt in that, or you've done this, that, and the other. There's actually, and then he gives a tip in terms of, well, if you had done this, this, and this, you would have gotten a better result.
Yeah.
But there doesn't seem to be that.
And that's what we want to know.
I also think.
Sorry, that's what we want to know at home, John. We want to know why it doesn't work, or because you learn by your mistakes. That's how I've learned over the years. And all I then do is tell people, do it this way because I've gone through all the stress and the mistakes. Don't make them. I've made them for you. Do it this way. It works. And I wholeheartedly agree.
I also think that a lot of the judging is done on personal taste. Now, I know that has to come into it, but you don't go, oh, Esme doesn't like pleats, or Esme doesn't like bows, you know, and she'll go, oh, I don't like this one because that shouldn't have anything to do with it. If you're judging a skill, it's not whether you like it, it's whether, because you might hate it, but it may be been made beautifully. But if you go, well, I don't like big bows, then that person's already at a disadvantage, aren't they?
Of course. That goes back to a saying at the very beginning, which was, it's not all about the sewing. And in the past series, I've had a complaint, shall we say, particularly in the transformation. I remember last season, they gave them a mound of different coloured fabrics. I think it was the parachute silk. And this person made a transformation. It was brilliant. But Esme didn't like the colour. And she pulled her and she didn't get it and I'm thinking, but the producers or the show put those fabrics there, which goes back to what you said earlier. Everybody should have exactly the same. I also think, the end, when they do that fabulous garment, it's down to the models because some of those models last night were catwalk models and made the garments look amazing. And others were people who were just maybe, there were fashion models or there were models, but they weren't catwalk models, and you could tell the difference.
Yeah, but also on people, anyone can call themselves a model these days, can't they? Because if you look at some of the shopping channels that sell clothes, you can tell which of those models are models and know how to show off an outfit, and how others just kind of walk, and that's the same with that. And I believe that they should have inclusivity within the models, but you're right, because if you have a short dumpy one and someone else has got a 6 foot tall willowy one, automatically, even though it's real life, your model for people judging, if you've got the short dumpy one, then you're at a disadvantage.
Completely. And also within the fashion industry, so for instance, we would a lot of houses don't do this now, but you have let's say a size 10, but you have say a 5'6" model, you have a 5'9" model, and then you have the over 6 foot. And what you do is you put the same garment on all three, and then what you do is you then tweak the pattern, and you take all the average measurements from that one size range, so that you will get almost like a one size fits all. And that's how it should be done. But then a lot of fashion houses now, they have a muse, and it's only a person. And I remember when I was working on Liberty shop floor, there was Giles Deacon, who's a DJ, but he's also a fashion designer. His muse was this very, very, very almost Jessica Rabbit, real big implants, but that was his muse. So every time we put somebody in it on the shop floor, they were drowned. It was like, you had extra luggage space to put, your suntan cream and everything like that in there. And to actually we had to alter everything. So it just shows you that even though you've got a muse, but that's the way that it should be. And I agree with you completely. If you've got somebody who is a completely different shape, then for instance, they should have a plus. One thing that came out on when we did this originally, it was all about, why don't they do a plus size section and use, real bodies, and show how, if you are dressmaking at home, how to adjust that pattern and what you need to do with the pattern. Those would be things that.
And also what suits different body shapes, because most people at home have trouble, and I'm not being rude by anyone, but they'll say to me, oh, I don't know how to pick colour, I don't know how to pick shape. So if you are more voluptuous, or if you are petite, some people don't know about proportion and what colours and what necklines to wear and things like that, which is what you should be taught if they're doing a dressmaking thing. Like you say, 1 week do a plus size, 1 week do a petite, so that they're not just, because do they have the same model every week? So because in theory, if you they don't have the same model.
I don't think so.
Because when Mark Francis was on it, he had the same model every week.
Well, maybe,
and I
maybe
was like,
they do.
Yeah, it might have changed, but I just thought by the end of week 12, you should know that person's body perfectly to then not get the waist in the wrong place and things like that. So it's kind of they're not kind of learning as they're going along. They're just kind of making the same mistakes as they're going along.
Because one of the girls last night, she'd lengthened the bodice by 6 centimeters. I think it was the girl that did the broderie anglais, and I was like, 6 centimeters. And it was wrong, but it would have been,
it was way too long.
It was too long, 6 centimeters. And another thing that would be really useful, I think, would be to show people how to actually measure, because they skip by that. And a lot of them are using patterns that are out there. In fact, the simplicity pattern with the guy, I think he was called Tony as well. He was the postman who wore the shorts. Now, when he was measuring, I noticed that the pattern, the simplicity pattern he had, I've actually got that one. It was the one with the petticoat that he just put underneath. But wouldn't it be great if we got to know actually where we're measuring?
Of it was missing.
Sorry? Where
half of it was missing.
Well, yes. Lesson, but again, it's down to time, isn't it? I mean, there's no way in this earth he would have done that. But yeah, it would just be nice to learn how to measure. Let's be right on a positive. Let's put this positive spin. Whatever craft or sewing programs on, it's fabulous for the industry. But last night did leave me wanting more. I was asking questions. How did you do that? Why did you do that? Could they have done that?
I think they're resting on their laurels, because the first few years it was so, and a lot of my ladies messaging saying, "Oh, isn't it fabulous? It's back." You only have to look at Facebook, and everyone's going, "Oh, it's so fabulous, it's back," which is brilliant. Like you say, it's good for the community, and it's good for people who want to watch that kind of show. But it could be even better. And I think what they've done is they've taken their eye off the ball, or whatever as you say, sort of thing. And it could be so much better. But nobody told the ladies listening, don't know that. They just want to see 12 people sewing and having a nice time. But it could actually be much better than it.
If you took, it'd be quite interesting to take out the minutes of blurb, shall we say, and there's not a great deal of sewing or cutting time out. It would have been nice to see. Is it Ashma who cut out the? She had the really silky fabric at the beginning. To watch her cut that out. Yes, and she actually positioned her flowers beautifully, and it would have been lovely to have seen the pattern pieces on there to see how she did that. And then there was another one.
Even if they only did one tip a week, they don't have to make it tip heavy, because that would be boring the other way.
Yeah.
But if we all learn one thing every, like a big thing, that's 12 weeks the series, or 10 weeks.
10
that's
weeks,
10 big things that we would learn over the series.
Yeah.
It's so like also when Esme and Patrick, when they're sort of like asked sort of like the question, where could it go wrong? And they ask Esme, where could it go wrong? She gives this whole sort of thing, but then when it comes to the critique, it's almost like, did you not just listen to yourself?
Yeah.
It just seems a bit, and they just need to, I mean, they've got so many contestants as well, and to fit all of those projects in, I don't think you need as many contestants, I don't think.
No.
And I think if you can, I mean, I'd love to be a fly in the wall, but obviously producers are picking personalities, and they're picking personalities that will work within the room situation. But it would be really, really interesting just to see how they would, if they had to say knock off a couple of contestants, it would just be like the pool of people who have actually applied for it. You would think, well, gosh, isn't it about champion, like they do on the Bake Off? It's like champion someone who really has really gone for it and has been sewn for years. Because there was one gentleman last night, and they were asking oh, how long is this? Only 2 years. I've only been sewing 2 years. And I'm like, well, 2 years is still 2 years. It's not like when Rafe was doing it and he said that he had only ever picked up a sewing machine in 6 months before COVID hit, and then
Uh-huh.
we find out that he actually works on a film company.
Yeah, and also his giveaway was on his wall of pictures. He had his and his friends. He go, "Oh, I made all those costumes, but it was Pride about 4 years before." And I was like, "You only started saying 6 months ago."
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It
But
is.
it shows that they're cast. They're cast for their,
Yeah.
you know, they just have to be careful because people are more canny than they're giving them credit for.
I was speaking to somebody who was actually on a completely different show, but it was the Interior Masters show with Alan Carr, and he actually was a contestant. He won the first challenge on the first show, and on the second show he went out, but it was because even though somebody else was not as good and it was critiqued not as good, it was because they ticked the boxes. And he said they'd made their decision at the beginning who was going to be in, who was going to be in the final, and they had to tick boxes along the way, which is probably how the Sewing Bee works. But I do think everybody, you know, everybody today will be looking at the twist tops. They'll be resurrected, and we'll forget the transformation challenge. The cut-offs. I mean, I personally would never wear a cut-off dress. I have not got the body. There'll be bits falling out. Never mind, you know, it fitting correct.
You can put it around the hem.
You
could,
cutouts
yeah. Around the hem.
Yeah, you could do. Yeah, that the older lady, I can't remember her name, who actually just did the little triangle cutouts around the waist.
Yeah.
But she got told off basically, didn't she? But never mind.
Because you couldn't see them.
Yeah. So,
but then positively, we don't want to be too negative about this.
No.
It's not like you say. It's nice to have a show that does sewing. It's nice to have a show with real people. But it's just as professionals, I think they're missing a trick.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what it is? We'll see the people blossom, and we'll all have our favourites, no doubt, as we're going along. And we'll all be thinking, you know, oh, that's how the twist top, shall we say, people have looked at that and thought, oh, that's how it went. And actually, you'll spend the time, have a go at these things, because you'll be able to spend the time at home and make sure you would test it and try it. You wouldn't just have to sew it. You would never be under that time pressure at home, which is the joy, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally.
So next week.
So who's going to win? Who's going to win then?
Well, I would say Ashma is very high up on my list.
From the offset, I thought, especially because she was using things like in previous seasons, like people have really shied away from satins, which is wise, because they can look stupendous or they can look horrendous. It's you know, it's one of those in the balance. But her working with those fabrics, she's obviously worked with them quite a bit. And for instance, what John was mentioning before, there's a difference between designers and technicians. And for instance, a technician will normally, in the fashion industry, will normally specialize in 3 fabric types. So you will have someone that will deal with silk, leather, and you know, cotton. So they've honed their skills in being, you know, if you wanted a dress that was French seamed and it was chiffon, you don't just hire a technician, you hire one that specializes in a 3 grouping, because whenever you book them to come in and do sample machining for you, that's who you book. And when you book through the agency, you ask them what fabric types do they work with, what do they specialize in.
Yeah. And you knew she wasn't going to do very well on the transformation, because she's a sewer, and it goes back to what you said, John. She's not a designer. You just knew she would be lost on that.
Yeah. Oh, I'd be flummoxed. I wouldn't want to do the transformation because the time pressure, 90 minutes.
90
minutes.
minutes.
Sew something and create it in your head at the same time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So my vote at the moment is Ashma, who I think did a brilliant job. They all did really well last night, I have to say. You know, it's like you say, it's a shame that anybody goes out in the first one. Who you voting for, Alistair? Who you championing?
I'm voting for Ashma as well.
Yeah. What about you, John?
I all through the show I was thinking about, because they showed her off at the beginning, then they kind of hid her for a little bit, and I thought, because they edit it all afterwards, don't they? So they know when they're editing who's further on down the line and everything. So they don't want to give the winner too many minutes on screen, do they?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll see what happens.
She could have a disaster, because if you look at Adam, a couple of years ago. He was doing really well. And then one week he made like a little kid sou'wester that went completely wrong.
Yeah.
And he was a better sewer than a lot of them, but he went out. So it could be that if they do have a dodgy week, they could be out, even though we think they're good.
Yeah. Well, next week's a complete curveball because it's swimwear. And exactly. And also there's a bag. There was a rucksack being turned through. So that's a complete curveball. But before we finish, what I want to say is that we have a little giveaway. And the giveaway is a bunch of the Vliseline tape. So there'll be the seam tape, which you could have used last night, the bias tape. There'll be some wonder web in there and some edge tape, a couple of others, which will just help your journey. So big thank you to Vliseline for that giveaway. And to win that giveaway, we're not saying a prize, it's a giveaway, is we'd just like you to like and subscribe. Like, subscribe, and even share and join in, because each week after the Sewing Bee, we will be having a chat with a special guest, and then obviously there'll be another giveaway every week. But I want to say a massive thank you, John, for giving up your time today.
My pleasure.
It's been brilliant, yes.
Well, I'll see you in how many weeks? Is it Wednesday? Because I'm on the last one as well, aren't I? When's that? July sometime?
Yeah, it's 10 weeks, I think, is the show. Yes, 10 weeks of the show. Yeah, 10 weeks, it'll be July. My goodness gracious me.
No. But my pleasure. It's lovely to chat to you both.
No, lovely
How's
to
your
chat
book
to you.
doing, John?
My book is doing brilliantly. I was last week's Amazon bestseller of the week.
Congratulations.
Wow. And is that where people can buy it from, John?
Yeah. So at the moment, when I first did it, I only did it to prove the publishers wrong, because they said it wouldn't sell. So at the beginning, I published it, I printed it, and I had them in my garage, and they were all sent out from my dining room down here. And then we went to Amazon. So they now do a paperback, the Audible, which is me reading it, and the what's the other one? Kindle, one of those, ebook. Yes. So they're all available on Amazon, or on my website. You can get the link through to Amazon.
Brilliant. That's great. Well, what we'll do is we'll pop the link onto your website to go that way. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
But thank you again. We'll see you in a few weeks. Take care, my love.
My pleasure. My pleasure. See you all soon. Take care.